Behind every brand, every movement, every leader, every transformation, there's a story. And intertwined in these stories is a message. And this podcast is for you, the next gen leader, coach, entrepreneur, and influencer. My name is Travis Brady, and I'm a branding mentor and sales story strategist. I hope you see me more of a guide than a host as I share the stories behind the brands, so you can take these stories, experiences, principles, and teachings and use them to share your story with the world. And welcome back to the story behind the brand. This podcast is all about really understanding the people that we love to follow, their personal brands, the stories, where they got where they're at today. But also my whole goal with the podcast is to teach you how to be a better storyteller, a better speaker. Hopefully these stories inspire you in your own journey. We can learn business tips from them as well. The most important thing we could do as leaders is be a really good communicator. And communication comes down to not sharing facts, but to essentially give stories, create visions, right? One of my favorite quotes is, in the Bible is, lead your people. Without vision, your people will perish. And so that just really crosses my mind a lot. So whenever I feel like I'm not moving forward in my life, I feel like because I'm not creating a vision that's powerful. So today I wanted to bring on powerhouse, Lance Tanaka. He was an executive he was an executive at Pepsi and Nike. He's been 24 years in executive coaching, lives all around the world. Now here in Arizona, we met at this networking event a couple weeks ago. Really great dude. So Lance, fill in the gaps, man. Tell him a little bit more about your story and your background.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it, Travis.
Of course.
If I could kind of encapsulate it all in one word, it's impact. That's what drives me, is I want to have an impact on a person or on a team or on an organization. And so these last 24, 30 years of my career have really been centered around that.
Okay, cool. Where did you grow up? Where did you spend your childhood?
I grew up in Chicago. And then, I lived in the same house for the first 17 years of my life. I was also a professional musician. So even at 16, 17, I'm working in nightclubs 5 nights a week, 5 hours a night in a band. But then after that, I just started moving all over the U.S. And then I eventually was asked to go to Japan, and that would have been in 91. And I felt, okay, be there 2 years, come back to the U.S. Well, it wasn't, it didn't happen that fast. I spent most of my professional career living in Asia.
Okay. You lived in Hong Kong for a little bit, though, didn't you? Is that where you were, when you were a Pepsi and Nike executive, where were you based out of then?
First with Pepsi, I was in the U.S., had different jobs in the U.S. Then I was the vice president for Chicago, the Midwest. Mm-hmm. Then they asked me to move to Japan, where I was the general manager for Tokyo Pepsi. Then I moved to Taiwan, where I was the president of Pepsi. Then they moved me to Singapore. Then I moved to Indonesia as managing director for that. And then I left them to join the Just Do It people. They recruited me because of all the change management that we went through. And I worked for them for 4 years, and it was a division of Nike, and it was all about completely restructuring the international business.
That's awesome. What's been your favorite place to live besides the U.S.?
Oh, hard to say. My 2 favorite places are Italy and Japan.
Italy and Japan, okay.
Well, I got to throw Hong Kong in there too.
Yeah.
Love the culture, love the food.
What's the difference between the culture of like Japan and China? Like, as you're bouncing around these places, like how much did you have to really adapt to the culture, with leadership and how you, essentially worked with people?
Oh yeah, you have to adapt. I would imagine if you live in the U.S. and you're working in the South or the North or the Northeast, there's adjustments that you need to make, culturally, or how you speak, or the words that you use. It gets exponentially more difficult when you're dealing with different countries and different languages. But that's one of the gifts that I've always had, this ability to adapt. So if we do coaching in Japan of a Japanese leader, it'll be different than what we'll do in mainland China. But even in China, Beijing versus Shanghai versus Guangzhou, it's different. It's very different. Or if we look at Taiwan, Singapore, and China and Hong Kong are all Chinese cultures, but they're all different. And so you have to make that, you have to adapt, you have to make adjustments.
So, and I guess that kind of segues into, what you do specifically, you come into a lot of Fortune 100 companies. Every company has a different culture. How does someone, adapt to the culture? And, there's a saying in leadership and coaching, meet people with where they're at. How do you meet people where they're at in your eyes in different cultures?
Well, a couple things to consider there. Number one is, I've worked with different industries, different countries, different levels, different cultures, different languages, and leaders face the same 8 challenges. I don't care where they are. It's the same 8. In fact, we wrote a book called Stories from the Top, and it's around those 8 common challenges that we leaders face, that we see over and over and over and over again. So although there are cultural changes, those changes are in implementation. And the actual challenge is the same wherever you go. But how you adapt it, how do you roll it out, how do you implement it will change in Japan versus in mainland China versus the US.
So what were some of those big differences between like the US, Japan, and China? Like what are those big cultural differences that you had to adjust to?
Uh, Japan is Japan's kind of interesting because you go there and it seems so modern, but it isn't. when you dive down into into the depths, the bowels, you'll see that it's very. I'll give you an example. This was in '91, so this was a number of years ago. Everybody's thinking Japan is this technological, amazing place, but I had people using an abacus. This is accounting. The accounting division, they all had abacuses on their desk. So, I'd say one of the major differences, like Japan is very group oriented, hugely group oriented, where the company, the group, the nation is more important than the individual. And whereas in China, where it's also a group, a culture, it's less about the company, it's more about the family.
Okay.
And then you get to the US where the culture is very much individualistic. It's me.
Yeah.
And so those are huge differences. Again, the challenges are the same. It's just how you have to adapt it to fit those 3 different cultures for it to work, for it to have impact.
I feel like Americans probably have more ego when it comes to leadership. Is that what you've noticed? I would imagine that. Like it feels like Japan and Hong Kong's more honor. Like it's more, yeah. Yeah, I don't know what's your thoughts on that. I haven't really I would love to go to Japan and China. You know, but yeah, so someone once told me they were in Europe and someone asked them, or American was over in Europe, and he said, "What do you do for work?" And he goes, "Are you from America?" And he goes, "Yeah." He's like, "How'd you know?" He's like, "That's not a question you would ask people in Europe. You don't ask people, what do you do?" You know what I mean? It's such an American thing to ask. So I thought that was really interesting. But we do that networking wise. And ever since I heard that, I've been trying to like change up my conversations with networking. One of my favorite go-tos is, "So what do you like to do for fun?"
Yeah.
And really starting on just a genuine connection rather than, "Hey, are we doing business or not doing business?" You know what I mean?
Well, that's an important concept to expand to any culture. If you really want to have an impact on anybody, regardless of where they're from, the focus should be them. You shouldn't be going in there and saying, let me tell you everything about me.
Yeah.
It's who are you? Like you said, the questions, what are you concerned about? What are your interests? What's your life about? What are you thinking about here? What are your challenges? That's really the kind of, I guess, foundational approach you should take if you want to really influence or really have an impact, because people don't care about you,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. WIIFM, what's in it for them?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, when did your career change? So it looks like you were more of the corporate route when you were younger, then you switched over into more of the entrepreneur route, working with companies. What was that switch and why did you switch over?
When I was 35, I was the GM for Pepsi Tokyo. I'm working 90, 100-hour weeks. It's crazy. But I still love the job. It was incredible. I'm only 35 and I'm running, a major city for a major company. So, I was blessed to be there. But I realized at that time, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And so what I did is I set a 10-year target saying, okay, when I turn 45, I'm going to quit the corporate life and I'm going to do what I love to do, what I'm really good at, and just focus
Mhm.
on that. And in that 10-year time frame, I went through a lot of self discovery, a lot of different tools, different assessments, and started realizing what it is that who I really was.
Mhm.
And so when I turned 45, I left. I left the corporate world, set up this little boutique leadership organization, and was focused around. Really, it was focused around who I am, my strengths, my passions, my experiences.
Okay. So when you go into these companies, what's the first thing you're doing when you get into these Fortune 100 companies?
And the first thing you're doing is assessing. Trying to talk to as many different stakeholders within the organization or within the team or within the country, and get a sense for, what are the challenges, what's their focus for this year, um, what are they doing versus the competition, what are their gold standards, what is the language that they use. I don't mean national language, but
Yeah.
in vernacular, the
Yeah.
kind of terms they use for things.
Mhm.
And it's all about that at first, because then from there we can then customize a package or a program that will really hone in on what is it that they really want to accomplish.
When working with leaders, because a lot of people listening to the podcast, they're working with leaders, they're working coaching other people, speaking to other people. What are some of the greatest things that or tips or strategies you would give to them when working with some of these leaders? Because the 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 double-edged sword, in my opinion, is they're so certain with themselves, but also they're so stuck in their certainty that maybe they might not be open-minded. Is that what you're finding with some of these people? It's like, the doctors kind of the same thing. They're taught to lead all the time. They're not really open for what anyone else would think. Like, what are some of the things that you're what are some of the biggest things that you learned through the process?
This is a generalization, but a good leader isn't the one who says, here's what this, I know where we need to go. Here's what we need to do. Go. A good leader understands that influence is the most critical thing. And especially if they look at it as influence without authority. There's a tendency to, when you're at the top, to use your authority to get things done, but that's really an incomplete way to lead people. A great way to lead people is to influence them, to get them to want to follow, not because they have to. If they have to, it's compliance. If they want to, it's commitment.
Mhm.
So, what a leader, an effective leader, especially today, because things have changed a lot with expectations, especially millennials now are in the middle management levels now, and they have a much different expectations of life and career than their bosses. So it's really understanding that in order to get wherever I got to go, I got to influence without authority to get people to want to follow. That to me is probably the most important thing that leaders need to learn.
Yeah, I feel like the old way was probably more authority and more compliance. Do what I say, growing up, my dad used to always say, do what I say, not as I do, just listen to me. I had a great dad, by the way. But I think that was just kind of like an old type style of leadership on how he was led. Like, tough it up, push through your injuries. And these days, and the older generation might say this generation's softer, and there might be some truth to that, right?
Yeah.
My dad used to always say, I don't understand you kids. And I was like, Dad, you just don't get it. But as I've gotten older, I'm looking at this younger generation. I go, yeah, I can see what my dad was saying. I just don't get it. So we're kind of stuck in our own upbringing, I guess, sometimes. But it feels like, especially corporate wise, these leaders can't be as strict and as bullyish as they used to be and get away with it. People will just go work somewhere else. It's almost like the new corporate has to be really flexible with people's lifestyle. Is that some of the things that you're noticing as well? Are you speaking to some of those things?
Oh, of course. This is probably one of the biggest issues now that leaders face is that their life was okay. Here's how I did. I worked hard. I put my head down. I just, you know, ran and just kept pushing.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, they'll look at the younger generation and say, "Oh, you're really soft. Want to work from home. You want to have a, personal day. Yes. However, the important thing to realize is that in leadership, there's actually nothing new. If we look at the history of man, the principles of leadership are the same today as they were 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 10 years ago. The difference is how do you flex it? How do you adapt it to the current situation? And every company is different. Every team is different. You just can't make this generalization saying, "Oh, the millennials are this," and
Mhm.
because it doesn't. Not all millennials are like that.
Yeah.
There's millions that they're all different. So it's understanding that we know there are certain principles that will never die. They're amazing. They're incredible. We've got to keep those, but we've got to figure out how can we adapt it.
Okay.
The other important thing, Travis, and this is critical when we're working with leaders, is leaders need to be the leader they were designed to be, not the leader they want to be, not the leader that people think they should be, not the leader that they admire from a distance, say, I want to be like that. It just doesn't work. And I've worked with over 1,000 leaders now. And the one foundational fact is you need to be the leader you were designed to be. Meaning you need to look at your DNA, you need to look at your values, you need to look at your upbringing, how you do things or how you feel. This is really, really important, and get rid of all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's this process of trying to, one, identify what that is, because a lot of people don't know
Mhm.
what it is, but it's this process of little by little pushing out the things that aren't you, and
Yeah.
little by little pulling in the things that are you. And this process of push out, pull in a fairly short period of time, you actually transform. And then you'll become more productive. You'll become authentic, and people love to follow authentic leaders, not authoritative leaders.
Mhm.
And everything changes. And then it also integrates your life, your professional, personal, religious life, all that starts coming together.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. As you speak, it just basically comes back down to me as like understanding and knowing your personal brand and being confident in your personal brand. And everyone has a different way of, leading people. And I was at this event last week, and I won't mention any names, but I was in the VIP room backstage, and we were talking amongst some people, and there was this guy. I knew he was successful of some level. I didn't know exactly what it was, and I went over and sat next to him. And I was like, "Hey, my name's Travis. What's your name?" And he said his name, and then I was like, "So tell me what you do." And he's like, "Oh, you just have to chat GPT me." He said it so arrogantly. I was like immediately turned off. I literally just stopped talking to him. Like I was just like, I'm not even going to entertain the ego. And I just literally just went back to my phone and completely ignored him. Because I couldn't believe how, like, I don't give a fuck who you are. Like, I would never. So just kind of going back to your thing of like being genuine, I think we get so stuck in I have to look like a leader and have the money of a leader and the car and the house of the leader that we forget, like you're saying, one of the most important things is really just being, I like the word genuine. At the end of the day, the only authentic person in my mind is God. He's the one all original copy. So we are all just copies, of God. And although we might not be, the authentic source, I think we could be genuine to who we are. And he got on stage and he asked everyone, he's like, who knows who I am? And like three people raised their hand. It was like later in the day, and the audience was kind of just like tired, and he wasn't getting the reaction from the audience. And it's almost like he started like almost like yelling at the audience and like calling him out. And it was just like the energy of the room just went zhoo. And I turned to my friend next to me. I was like, this guy is a douchebag. And the guy in front of me turns around and he goes, I know he's an asshole. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. It was so embarrassing. I was embarrassing from him. And the thing of it is, everyone could have learned something from him if he would have approached it completely different. Like he could have laughed it off, like, oh, I guess I'm not cool enough. And everyone would have resonated with that. They would have resonated with the fact that not everyone knows who I am, and everyone would have empathized with that because not everyone knows who I am. Not everyone knows who Lance was. So it was just crazy, and you could tell he was upset and he got outside of himself. And yeah, it was one of the craziest presentations I've seen.
Well, when you bring up genuineness and you bring up the Lord, if you go back to Genesis in the garden, a lot of people look at it and kind of misread what the Garden of Eden is. People think, oh, this wonderful stuff, frolicking, everybody's happy. But if you really read it closely, what is happening is what it is saying there is that everybody has their own garden. It's a unique garden. And, my belief is that God bestowed the gifts on each and every person. Mm-hmm. And so it is our responsibility to understand what is in our garden, what vegetables, what plants are in our garden. We have to tend it. We have to work it. And then we have to grow it and we have to expand. And that's actually the very foundation of what we're doing when we're working with leaders, saying, hey, I use the word authentic, you use the word genuine. You got to understand how to be a genuine leader. And the way you do that is figure out what's in your garden. Figure out the gifts that you've been given and then tend it, grow it, expand it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, God taught in the form of story because he realized straight information was not going to be very entertaining for us. Metaphorical stories. I love that. Quick question for you. You've done a lot of speaking over the years. A lot of listeners, they're getting into speaking. They're already in speaking. I think one of the most important skill sets that you can learn as a leader is to be an amazing storyteller and speaker. On top of a leader, I don't think you're ever done trying to be a better leader. It's not leadership trained, it's leadership training. What were some of the biggest things you've learned through speaking on stages?
Oh, I mean, a lot, because I've been doing public speaking since fourth grade. I can't, if you have time, at some point I'll talk to you about what happened in fourth grade, but I started doing a lot of presentations and I've just been doing it my whole life. So obviously, the more you use it, the better you can hone your craft. One thing that is really important is I feel that stories have to have three elements in them. And because a lot of times when you say tell a story, people are thinking like Aesop's fables, you gotta, no, that's not necessarily what a story is. A story is you want people to remember what you're saying. And if you have three elements in it, you improve the probability. One is cognitive, which is facts, figures. People don't usually have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But the other two are left out. The second one is around perceptual, is that you need to teach or get your audience to visualize something. They have to actually visualize it. Now, you can do it by painting the story. You can do it by showing an image on the screen, but you got to get people to visualize. And the third one, which I think is the most critical, is called affective, which is around emotion. I got to get people to feel what I want them to feel. And so whether it's public speaking on stage, whether it's meeting facilitation, or whether it's doing a PowerPoint presentation, you got to build those three aspects, those three elements into your presentation. And when you do that, you have a better chance that people are going to get what you're saying, and you're going to hopefully get what you want as a result of it.
Yeah, those are some great tips. The biggest transformation I think I had in my speaking was when I heard this. The goal of a story is not necessarily to tell a story. The goal of a story is to bring people into an experience.
Yeah.
And when you bring people into experience, it kind of goes along with what you're saying. Then they feel the feelings that you felt during your experience. At the end of the day, our goal is to get people to change their minds, right? Yeah. And when we pull them into our story, they feel the things that we do. And transformation is more based upon feeling than it is thought, and so it goes along with what you've said. So I love it. Where can people follow you? How can people learn more about you and what you got going on, Lance?
Well, they can go to my website for my company. It's lancetanakagroup.com. They can go to, I've got a number of emails, but the best one is lancetanaka@lancetanakagroup.com. Or they can go to lancetanaka360.com. And all in that, we'll have all these videos, all this information about who I am. But I would love if there's anybody that would like to hear more or like to connect. I love networking. I love because as we said in the beginning, impact is what's most important to me. And it doesn't matter if it's a president, of a Fortune 100 company, or it's a worker in a smaller. I don't care. The important thing is, can I help you? Can I truly help you? That's what I'm driven by. So please, I would like anybody to contact me.
Nice. Is that your logo right there on your shirt?
Yeah, the LT.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. I'm glad that you got the memo, the butterfly collar with the logo on the sleeve or on the chest. I was literally just got back from the gym, took a shower, put on the shirt. I was like, I think I'm going to wear this today. I was actually trying to, look more like an executive coach like Lance over here. So I thought I'd put on the shirt. Looks like I right one. So
that looks good.
Yeah. Okay, well, great conversation today. Appreciate you being on the podcast. If you feel like this can benefit someone, please share the podcast, copy the link, text it over. Okay, be inspired in what you're doing. Remember, your story is the X factor. Share it with the world. Okay, and we'll talk soon. Good talk.
I'm going to do that. Thank you so much, Travis.
Hey, you have a story to share with the world, which means you need to get on more live stages. Go to benextgen.com/speak. Again, benextgen.com/speak. Or you could just click the link in the description. Fill out an application. Our team will reach out to you and show you how our speaker partnership works. Get on a stage, get video, blow up your brand, blow up your business. Let's go.